Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Freeston. I'm Director of Quality Improvement at the Early Years Alliance, and I have the pleasure of being Project Coordinator for the Strong Early Years London project delivered, commissioned by the Mayor of London, being led by the Early Years Alliance with a range of stakeholder partners. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's webinar. It's a slightly different format than previous sessions, if you've been with us before. It's my pleasure to welcome Jason Clark and Lenny Tyler. Jason is Financial Analysis Manager for the Early Years Alliance. Can we just check your microphone, please, Jason?
Are you receiving?
Oh, you worried me for a second. We've got a bit of a delay on that one. I'm not sure. I can now. That was a worrying silence. You've been playing your games with me. And Lenny Tyler is Business Support Manager for the Early Years Alliance. Lenny.
Good evening, everybody.
Now, I got a bit of feedback on that. I hope that's my broadband issue rather than anybody else's. Is the sound okay from everybody else joining us? If people can just put a note into the chat, because I've been having some problems with my broadband today, and hopefully that isn't affecting you. Right. The reason we have two finance experts today, no, it was echoey. Karen, thank you. Okay, we'll hope that that gets sorted. 6 o'clock is always a difficult time for webinars. What we're going to do today, the reason we have two business management financial analyst experts with us is under the Strong Early Years Alliance program, we have developed a budget toolkit, which we're introducing today as an opportunity to work with PVI providers in London to look at the way they do their budgeting primarily for the 22-23 year, but obviously it can be at any point in the cycle. So we won't do our usual format of a webinar. In effect, what's going to happen is Jason is going to be the consultant walking Lenny, who is an experienced nursery manager, through the process of budget setting that the toolkit facilitates. That will become apparent as we go on, but it does mean we've got some technical issues that we will be doing a live completion of the toolkit via the broadband in 3 or 4 different places and broadcast on the net. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, just a couple of slides by way of introduction if I get onto the right screen. For those of you, I will just rush through these quicker than usual because I'm imagining everybody who's with us today has attended, is aware of Strong Early Years London project. We will circulate these slides around tomorrow, so I won't spend a great deal of time by way of background because I do want to get into the meat of today's session. The products from the project are a website which acts as a one-stop shop for any provider who is looking for information around a range of business topics where they can start the journey of finding out who can give them some support. We've been doing monthly webinars and Business Connect training sessions, and I'll give a few more details about that before we end tonight's session, but also working with the local authorities to do group surgeries. And we're already planning a number of group surgeries with a few local authority colleagues on this particular topic, because I think it's going to be very popular. And we also have a dedicated helpline. I'll give you the contact details at the end in terms of how you can find out more about the project in general. But really, I think that we need to try and move quickly onto today's session. It went perfectly well in rehearsals and we did it within the hour. So hopefully we won't take more of your Monday. I'm sure that will be the case today. So the aims of today's session is to introduce the Strong Early Years London Budget Toolkit and the support that goes with it. And the support is very important. We recognize that this is a spreadsheet-based software, which could be very daunting if it was just, right, here's the kit, off you go. What we are keen to try and do is develop a support arrangement with trained members of staff who can actually work with PVI providers, with you, to get a sense of how the toolkit can best serve your purposes. So we're going to introduce it today, demonstrate how it can support you to analyze your forecast income and expenditure in the 22-23 financial year. Importantly there, it's to help providers analyze it. It doesn't do it all for you. It's as much the constructive process of the discussion that goes on with the person sitting alongside you as it is keying in the numbers. And again, with the demonstration we're going to do, hopefully that will become apparent as we go through today. And also, importantly, we're here to try and outline the consultancy support that we can make available through the project to ensure that most people can optimize their use of the program. Right, without further ado, I shall stop sharing my screen. Oh, he says confidently, if I can get my cursor, if I can get my mouse into the right place, I will stop sharing my screen. Jason, are you able to share your screen now, please?
I'll give it a go. You see that all right, Michael?
That's coming good. I can see that. Can I just check with everybody else that that is now visible on their screen? Some raised hands are going up. The thing I should have said is my role in this session from now on is to field your questions and comments as they occur, and Lenny and Jason are walking you through the process. So do please type any questions you have into the chat box, and I will try and weave them in as we go through the process. Lenny, Jason, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, as Michael said, my name is Jason, Financial Analysis Manager at the Early Years Alliance. We've been asked to put this toolkit together to assist providers in looking at their financial performance in the time ahead, and to look at any areas within their budgeted performance that they might be able to make sort of meaningful changes in. So not only what is likely, or based on a reasonable set of assumptions, what is likely to happen, but based on what is likely to happen, what can you do as a provider to improve your performance? Are there areas that this toolkit can guide you towards in order that you can look at some of the areas that are important for you that you might be able to change? I mean, is that along the lines that you would say, Lenny?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just retouching on the point that Michael addressed, sort of one of the key things about numbers is conversation. And I think that's what this tool is developed to do, is to generate conversation. It's to kind of get you thinking about all those things that affect, have financial impact on your setting.
Yeah,
Lenny, that was a bit echoey for me. Can you try going on mute and then coming back to see if we've got?
Yeah, we'll do. Also, yeah.
Jason.
Yeah. So as Lenny says, it's about conversation. So part of this this toolkit is really about prompting you also to think about some of the areas that you would want to look at in a financial forecast that you may not always be thinking about or be aware of. So what we thought we'd do today, rather than sort of talk around these things, what we thought we'd do today is kind of walk through the toolkit. Lenny is going to be, as Michael said, Lenny's going to be a provider. I'm going to be the consultant who's assisting him in terms of putting the information in. And what we're not doing, what we're kind of keen to say, that we're not providing financial advice. We're not saying this is what we think your setting is going to do. We're trying to assist you in making those kind of those choices and making those decisions for yourself. So everywhere throughout this toolkit, we've got lots of notes. so hopefully, as this is being completed, as Michael has said, hopefully we'll have one of our consultants assisting you through this process. But there are also notes at every stage, so that what you're being asked to provide hopefully is reasonably clear. So I'm not proposing to read through these notes on page 1, the introductory notes, but they're there for you, should you need them. So we start off by putting in the basic details, the setting details. So when does your budget or your financial forecast period start? What sort of setting are you? Are you a full day, a sessional term time setting? How many weeks of the year do you operate for? And what sessions do you deliver? So Lenny, I know your setting is Woodlands Preschool. When would you like your financial forecast to start from?
I would like it to start in the summer 22. My financial year runs from April to March, so this gives me a chance to look ahead on that.
Excellent. Okay, so most settings will probably start in the summer term. Certainly most of the Alliance settings do. But I know that particularly for some sessional settings, they might run their financial year the same as the school year. So they might want to start in the autumn. And some, not many, but some may want to start at the beginning of the calendar year in the spring. So the toolkit is flexible so that it can be used by any setting that starts at any time of year. But for most settings, I suspect that the summer term will be the first term of the budget. In this case, we're saying we'll start from summer 22. And I think from previous conversations, Lenny, that you are a sessional term time setting.
I am a sessional term time setting that operates for 38 weeks of the year.
Grand. So
I'm sorry, Lenny, that is still coming back really echoey. Is there a different way we can plug into a different microphone for you?
Yeah, bear with me.
Thanks.
You hearing me all right, Michael?
Yeah, you're fine, Jason.
Grand.
Carry on while Lenny's sorting that.
Okay, so again, I'm just going to go through, because Lenny's going to tell me, Lenny's a sessional term time setting, and we're going to put information into this toolkit that's for a sessional term time settings. But as I say, the toolkit can be used by full daycare settings and sessional settings. So had you chosen full daycare, then you have the option of putting in the number of weeks of the year that you open for as a sessional, because we're saying we're going to be a sessional term time setting. The assumption is that we run for 38 weeks of the year, which matches the number of weeks of free entitlement paid by the local authority each year. So, Lenny, what sessions does your setting deliver?
Okay, I'm still in the middle of changing the mic over, so if it seems echoey, bear with me.
Okay.
Okay, so I operate a morning session 9 till 12.
There we go. 9 till 12. Yeah.
Somebody has said our settings are open for all year 52 weeks and term time 38 weeks, but only allowed to select one option. Therefore, we're both sessional term time and full daycare. I think what that says settings plural. I think you can probably run this on individual settings. Is that?
If you could run it on individual settings, or I mean, because if you're operating all setting, but if you offer set sessions term time only, then I think what in terms, that would be slightly trickier. But what you would then be able to do is set up the sessions that are delivered term time only, and then when it comes to budgeting the occupancy, you would only budget the occupancy during term times, but not holiday periods. So you should be able to cover it. I mean, that is a slightly more complicated scenario, but it should still be able to be accommodated. Okay, so you had morning 9 till 12.
Okay, is it still echoey for a start?
Yep.
It is a bit echoey.
It must be a broadband thing,
about it.
Okay.
No, carry on.
Afternoon session operates from 12 till 3.
Obviously, we have a Dalek who is running this this nursery and Woodlands preschool, and therefore we have to accommodate it accordingly.
My next attempt is no headphones.
Okay. 12 till 3, next session.
And then I also offer an all-day session, which is from 9 till 3.
Okay. Anything else, or is that it?
No, that's what we operate.
Okay. And do you offer those sessions Monday to Friday?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Thank you for that. And what do you charge for these sessions, Lenny?
Okay, so obviously we don't have babies. We're from 2+. So pricing is for the morning session for a 2-year-old is £19.
Okay.
And the afternoon session for 2-year-olds also £19.
Yeah, and the all-day session?
We do a small bit of discount on the all-day session, so that's £37.
Grand, and then the 3 and 4-year-olds?
Is £18 for the morning and afternoon. And again, small discount for the full day, so that's £34 we charge.
£34, good. Okay, so we've got the sessions that we deliver and the fees that we charge for those sessions. So now we want to get an idea of how many children are likely to attend those sessions and also understand the numbers of children that will be taking the free entitlement and the amount of funding that the local authority pays for that free entitlement. So the next thing that we ask is how many children are going to attend each of these sessions that we have noted on the My Setting Details page. Now, in order to make this as simple as we can, particularly for sessional settings, what we're saying is, like, just tell us what a normal, average, typical week in each term will look like. So in this case, we're starting the budget or the toolkit in summer 2022. So we're asking the question, how many sessions do you think you will deliver changes across each of these sessions in the summer term in a typical week, likewise in the autumn term, and likewise in the spring term? Now, quite often, knowing what you're going to do in the future is a kind of, stick your finger in the air exercise. But quite often you can look at past performance. Quite often you can look at previous years. You can get a sense of how your occupancy moves from one term to the next. You can certainly look at your current occupancy and forecast forward, looking at your waiting lists and who's likely to come in, who's likely to leave. So you're just making your best estimate of what you think is likely to happen. So Lenny, for the summer term, how many of these sessions do you expect to deliver in the summer term?
Okay, so for the 0 to 2s, it's going to be none because we don't deliver to that age group. So 2 to 3s, in the morning session for the summer, we've got 8 2-year-olds that do all 5 mornings. So I know for the summer that'll be 40.
Okay, so if, as Lenny says, because it's a bit it's a bit delicate. He was saying there are 8 children attending the morning session every day. So that would be 40 sessions delivered in a week. So here we're going to say 40 2 to 3-year-old morning sessions delivered in a week. Next, Lenny.
That's a very smiling Lenny we've got there. So I think we might have broken his broadband.
Right. What I could do is
information.
Yeah. Lenny, you're back again. Sorry, mate. You froze for a second. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it still echoing?
That's better.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So with the afternoon session, that is 50.
50. Okay.
And all days for
4 doing all day. Okay. And then in the 3 to 5s
is 100.
Okay.
Sessions for the week.
Yeah.
And then 110 for the afternoon.
Okay, and how many 3 to 5s are doing full days?
10 for the full days.
10, okay, and then the same for the autumn term. What do we think?
Okay, so based on looking at previous years, I'm looking forward that this is likely to be 30.
Okay.
And 30 for the afternoon as well.
Yeah.
With just 2 all day.
Okay.
And then for the 3 to 5s is 70 for the morning session.
Yeah.
Is 80 for the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then none for the full day.
Okay. And then in the spring?
And again, on the spring, using previous years as kind of a bit of a guide to this, is 40 for the morning session.
Yeah.
Is 45 for the afternoon session.
Yeah.
And 3 for the all day session.
Okay.
And then 90 for the morning 3 to 5s.
Yeah.
100 for the afternoon.
Yeah. Oh.
And 10 for the all day. And just by way of explanation, obviously I've given you those numbers, but that's based on me working out how many sessions I'm selling for each child.
Yeah.
For the whole week.
So as Lenny says, if you've got, you might have one child doing all 5 mornings. You might have 4 children doing 4 mornings. You might have a couple of children doing 2 mornings. You add up all of those sessions for the whole week, and then that's the numbers that we've popped into the budget here. But I think this is probably the most challenging area of the toolkit, is understanding how to input occupancy correctly. And I think this is where, if there are any concerns, then hopefully the consultants can steer you towards getting the information put in here accurately. But we're happy to help with this in any way that's required. So, and as Lenny says, quite often the best way to get this information is just to look at what has happened previously, and that'll give you a good guide. So you can see what we're doing here. We're kind of building up an idea of the sessions. We're building up an idea of what we charge for those sessions, and then we're saying, so what do we think the numbers of children attending those sessions will be? And if we multiply the numbers of children attending sessions by the fees that we get paid for them, then we end up working out what our fee income will look like. But part of the equation is then also to know, well, look, these are all of the children. And some of these children, in fact, a significant number of them will be funded. So we need to, first of all, establish how many of these children will be funded. Then we can work out the funded income, and then we'll know that the rest of the delivery is fee paid, and the toolkit will work that out. So the next section is to say, find out what we think the funded headcount numbers will be over the same period, Lenny. So in terms of NEF, of the 3 and 4 year olds, what's the headcount number that you're expecting for a 15-hour entitlement in the summer term?
For the summer term, that will be 42.
Okay.
That's better, Lenny. It sounds better.
Third choice of microphone.
And then in the autumn term?
30.
30. And then in the spring?
38.
38. Do you expect them to receive 30 hours?
Yeah, so minimum amount on these. So 2 for the summer term.
Yeah.
None for the autumn term.
Yeah.
0 for the autumn term.
0 for the autumn term, sorry, yeah.
And 2 for the spring term.
Okay. And then 2-year-old funding, what are your headcounts looking like for that?
Will be 18 for the summer term.
Yeah.
Will be 12 for the autumn term.
Yeah.
And 17 for the spring. And again, the numbers that I'm giving you are based on previous sort of looking back at previous occupancy and sort of forecasting, looking at my waiting list and that sort of thing.
Perfect. Well done. Okay. And then the other thing we want to establish is the length of term. So the number of weeks in each term that the local authority will be paying funding for. So and generally speaking, you can look at the local authority's calendar, and bearing in mind that that might add up to 39 weeks and they'll be funding for 38. So you need to be clear as to the number of weeks that will be funded. But what are the number of funded weeks that you're expecting in the summer term?
It's 12 in the summer term.
Okay, and then the autumn term?
Is 14.
So I'm guessing the spring is 12.
Yeah, give me 12 again.
So these 3 add up to 38. Okay,
yep.
And what is the hourly funding rate paid by your local authority for nursery education funding?
Okay, so for 3-4 year olds is £4.35.
Okay.
And for my 2-year-old funding is £5.40.
£5.40. Okay, that's grand. So
everybody is sorry. I'm conscious of that. I'm trusting everybody is with this. I had a couple of questions saying both basically about can we go over the occupancy calculation. My suggestion is we park that, because this, as people can imagine, this has been the thing that we've been going backwards and forwards on so often developing this. And I do think it's something where we are talking about offering support to work this through. But I think, so we bear with us at the moment. This can be done by way of preparation in advance of doing this. And I think what the work that Lenny has done is helpful in that he understands his provision in advance, and we can have that liaison before having the completion of the document into the.
I think very, very simply, the occupancy, to reiterate, are the numbers of sessions that you will deliver in a typical week. So if one 2-year-old attends every day in the morning, then that would be 5 days of morning sessions. So that would count as 5. And in this case, Lenny has said he's got 8 2-year-olds who are attending every morning. So that's 8 children doing 5 morning sessions. So 8 times 5 equals 40. But that 40 could have just as well been made up of 16 children. Well, not doing 2.5 sessions, but you see what I mean. You could, you basically count up the numbers of sessions that are being delivered. So it's not the numbers of children, it's the numbers of sessions. And it's not the numbers of sessions in a day, it's the numbers of sessions in a week.
Thank you.
So that is what we're trying to get at. And that's the basic calculation, but we're very happy to help you with that.
Just to add to that, Jason, sorry, one of the other things that we looked at when we was doing this is converting it then into total hours. Because often we work in total hours, particularly when we're looking at early as entitlement and we're looking at hours. So the conversion into hours should kind of support your methodology behind that and do a check. So, for example, we'll see when if you go through now, the 690 delivery of 3+, if you scroll down, Jason, you can see that this matches up with my summer term because I don't have any fee paying 3+ children at the setting. So I know that that's purely on my funded. So I kind of are checking myself on that basis.
So that 690 hours is calculated by saying, well, there are 100 morning sessions being delivered in a week, 110 afternoon sessions, and 10 all-day sessions. So that's 100 times 3, 110 times 3, 10 times 6, which adds up to 690 hours. And 690 hours is actually the same as 42 children doing 15 hours over 12 weeks, plus 2 children doing 30 hours over 12 weeks, because all of the 3-year-old delivery in the summer term is funded. So those two numbers, you would, if all of your children are all funded, then that number should be the same as that number, and then that number will be the same as that, and so on. So it's, as Lenny says, it's about the hours, and hopefully that makes that makes sense. Fingers crossed. So we've got the hours, we've got the total hours that we're delivering. The other thing to say is that this is all of your delivery. So that actually does prompt me to say that if you're saying you're going to deliver 690 hours of 3-year-old places in the summer term in a typical week, then in a week of delivering NEF, you can't deliver more than 690. You couldn't, because how would you wouldn't be able to have more funded delivery than the numbers of children that you're and the numbers of hours that you say your settings delivered. So that's that would also, there is a kind of a message that pops up if that's done incorrectly. But your occupancy, your overall occupancy, has to be at least as high as your funded occupancy. So we've got the funded headcounts, we've got the weeks in the each of the terms, we've got the hourly rate that the local authority is paying for nursery education funding and 2-year-old funding. And from that, we'll be able to work out how much overall funded income we're going to have and how much fee income we're going to have. But we also want to know a bit about when the funded income will be paid. So some local authorities will pay twice a term, and quite often you get your first payment in the first month of the term, so April, September, and January. And quite often the second payment comes towards the end of the term. I think quite often that means June, November, and March. But other local authorities pay monthly. So in order for your financial forecast to show the income in the month in which you receive it, you're asked here to say what percentage of your funding you will get in each of the months of the term. And the other thing as well is, if your local authority pays in 2 batches, let's say it pays in April and June, summer term funding, some local authorities pay 50% and 50%, some 60-40, some 70-30. So again, you put in whatever is appropriate and applicable to you. So Lenny, fire away.
Okay, so for mine, it's split in 2 payments. I get 70% in the April.
Okay.
And 30% in the July.
So you see, this is highlighted red. That's just because until this adds up to 100%, it gives you a little warning that it should add up to 100%. Okay.
And the autumn term is 70% in the September and then 30% in November.
Okay.
And in the spring, it's 70% in January and 30% in the March.
Grand. So the funding will be divided in those proportions in the budget, on the budget page when we get to it. Okay, so pupil premium. We want to know how much pupil premium we're going to get each term. So at the moment, I think there's been recent guidance issued to say that the hourly rate at which pupil premium will be paid has been raised from 53p an hour to 60p an hour. So we know that we're going to get 60 pence an hour. We know what the entitlement is in terms of hours per eligible child. So all we need to know is the number of pupil premium children we're expecting each term. So how many pupil premium children are you expecting each term, Lenny?
So in the summer terms, 10.
Okay.
And obviously because I'm looking ahead for the summer term, this change that Jason described with the money is from April. So that's why it's picking up that it's 60 pence and not the current 53. I've got 6 for the autumn term.
Yeah.
And I have 8 for the spring. And I say I have, these are estimates based again on previous years of the thing. Obviously, I'm not going to know this until children come through, but it's a good estimation based on previous years' attendance.
So just to recap on how these hours are arrived at, and Lenny, put me right if I've got this wrong, but each eligible child is funded similarly to nursery education and 2-year-old funding, in that you get 15 hours a week for the duration of the term. So in this case, we would have 10 children times 15 hours times the 12 weeks of the term. Here we've got 6 children times 15 hours times the 14 weeks of the term. And again, 8 times 15 times 12. And that arrives at these numbers of pupil premium hours for the term. So that number of hours at that amount of money equals £1,080, likewise 756, likewise 864. So the next thing is to know is when should we show that in the forecast? When will we receive the funding?
Okay, so on my, it's received toward the end of each term. So it's July for the summer term, November for the autumn term, and March for spring 23.
Okay, and I have, when we put this together, that was the way that we left it. But then I was advised by some providers that their local authorities pay them monthly. So there is an option here just to ignore that. You don't have to put in a month in which the pupil premium is received. Instead, you just tick, we get paid monthly, and then it divides the amount for each term across the months in that term. But in this case, we're saying we get it in these particular months, so that's what it will show in the forecast. Okay, so fee and funded income. So here we've just got a little visual representation of your fee and funded income. So as what we're showing up here is the total hours budgeted per term. So these are the total hours that we're saying we're going to deliver per term at our setting. And these hours, 690 we're looking at 3 to 5 year olds or 3 and 4 year olds, 690, 450 hours, 630 hours. That matches 690, 450, 630. So you should be able to follow the information through from the pages that you've already filled in. And so you have a total number of weeks that are hours per week that are delivered. So these three added together over the number of weeks in the term, and then the total number of hours that are delivered in terms of childcare delivered at your setting across that term. And then you can see how that breaks out. So we'd normally expect to see that you're delivering more hours of childcare in the summer term, because that's when your occupancy tends to be at its highest. The autumn term tends to be the longest term, but with the lowest occupancy. And then the spring term is usually quite a short term, but with occupancy picking back up again. So you can see this is the total number of hours delivered. Now then, what we're looking at down here are the funded hours delivered. So again, 690, 450, 630 comes from the funded hours that are worked out here. And again, it works out across the term. So total, if you add these together, funded weeks in the term, total 2-year-old funded hours delivered, total nursery education funding hours delivered. So if you add these two together, it will give the total number of funded hours delivered. And up here is the total number of all hours delivered. So the difference between those two would be fee paid hours. That's what's left. You would end up with 288 hours of fee paid in the summer term, 168 in the autumn, 216 in the spring. So you'll end up with, in this case, a lot of funded income and a relatively small amount of fee income. And it shows you up here. There's a little calculator. It shows you how that all works out. So I don't want to dwell on that too much, because there's quite a lot of numbers and calculations going on there. But it's the kind of thing that I think if you sit with and you have a look through, you should be able to see where all the information is coming from, and hopefully it'll prove instructive.
And just to add to that, Jason, what helps me as well, this page, is being able to, because I'm forecasting some of my numbers, is to adjust occupancy and see the financial impact, the income generation that changed for me. So it allows me to kind of see that flexibility on my estimations visually.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can do the same thing with the budget itself. When we get to the budget page, you can, you might want to know, like, for every child that I add to my occupancy, what difference does that make to my annual income? And so you look at your annual income on the budget page, you come in here, you change a number, and you go back and you see. Now that you wouldn't budget for that unless you expected it to happen. But what it does do is it tells you, well, if I could go out and get an extra child a week or an extra 2, what would the impact of that be? And what difference would that make to my financial performance? So, but as Lenny says, if you're doing that on the budget page, you're just seeing that as figures, whereas this actually gives you a little bit more of a kind of graphical representation.
I think it's a really nice visual, because it also gives you a sense check. doesn't it, really? If things look really, once you've got used to this, if things look odd in those donuts, it allows you to start asking the questions as to, well, why is that the case? That's
exactly right.
Really interesting.
Exactly. So the final area, now you can see in this budget here that the vast majority of income is NEF. And then there's a good chunk of two-year-old funding. There's a little smidge of fee income, and then there's some other income. So this other income we haven't actually got to yet, but the other income is input on this page here. And you just, it's a coverall. You basically put in any other income that you might be expecting to generate at your setting. So we've put in a couple of headings here, which are fundraising and grant, because most settings do a little bit of fundraising. Grant income's not always very common these days, but I know, you know, you get supermarkets and all sorts who occasionally provide grants to local providers. So it may be there's some grant income, but also you have a whole number of cells in which you can put in your other types of income that you know that you receive. And over here, we've suggested what some of those might be. It could be disability access funding, could be one-to-one funding, SEND support, could be donations. I know at some of our settings, we've had creche, we used to get creche delivery. So whatever's applicable to you, that's what you put in here. And then you would just note the amount that you expect to receive under each of those headings in each term. So Lenny, what are your numbers?
Okay, so I do some fundraising, and that's about £150 a term.
Okay. Do you get any grant income?
No, don't currently get any grant income.
Is there any other income that you want me to note?
No, we don't have any other income.
Okay. So we've completed the occupancy and the income side of the forecast, the toolkits. Now we're looking at the costs side. What do we think our costs are likely to be? And the main cost, as you'll all be very well aware, at any setting are your staff costs. It tends to be staff costs are anywhere between sort of, I would think 70, 75, even 80% of your overall costs, followed by premises costs, and then obviously your consumables and your equipment and all the rest. But so what we'll do here is we'll put in details of each of our staff members, what their job titles are, the number of hours per week that they'll each work, the hourly rate that we pay them, the numbers of weeks in the year that they work, and they're paid to work, the pension contribution percentage, and the terms of the year in which we're expecting to employ them. So there might be, generally speaking, you're going to tick all three terms, but it might be that you have a vacant position that you're expecting to fill from the spring term. So you'd have 2 blank and then a tick, or it might be that somebody's heading off on maternity leave. So if they're leaving in the autumn, you might have a tick here and then 2 blanks, and then you might have their cover starting from when they leave. So it's entirely dependent, obviously, on the makeup of your staffing and any changes to your staffing, looking at the period ahead that you would anticipate. But in terms of putting in names and job titles, you might not actually want to put people's names in. It's entirely up to you from a data protection point of view. But you could just put initials. But in this case, Lenny, do you want to just tell me what the details of your staff are?
Yeah, so I'll give you the job titles. So
yep.
I've got a manager and an assistant manager, and then 5 educators. So my manager and assistant both work 35 hours a week.
Yep.
And the rest of the team work 32.5 hours a week.
Okay.
The hourly rate for the manager is £12.50.
Yep.
For the assistant manager is £11.
Yeah.
And then £9 for the educators.
Grand. How many weeks a year do they work?
They all work 43.6 weeks, which includes a holiday entitlement that they get.
Okay. And is there a pension contribution that you make?
Yeah, so it's 3% for all staff.
So I think 3% is the minimum, isn't it? Under auto enrollment.
Yeah. Just had a question in. What do you do if staff are paid annual salary and not paid hourly?
Well, that's a fair question. I think what you'd have to do is you'd have to work out what their hourly rate is.
Take the pay or the total, depending on it's just the salary rate and divide that by the number of hours. Again,
exactly.
that's a bit of the pre-work to do before, isn't it?
Take the salary and divide it by the number of hours they work a week and the number of weeks per year that you pay them for. So if you're a sessional setting and you pay holiday pay, as you will, then you would work out the number of hours a year that employee works. So that would be your in this case, 43.6 weeks times their contracted hours per week. So it's either 32.5 or 35, depending on which position they hold. So 43.5 times, let's say 32.5, 43.6 times 32.5. That would be the number of hours per year that they work. And you would divide the salary by that number, and that would give you their hourly rate of pay.
Thank you.
And all of the staff work, all terms.
So we did have a question as well when we ran through this previously, where at the Alliance, we pay pension on whole salaries, but some employers, many employers, I think, pay pensions only on qualifying earnings. So what we've done is we've just introduced a box down. You just say which it is. And if you say it's on qualifying earnings, it will not apply the pension cost to the element of the salary that doesn't qualify as qualifying earnings, if that makes sense.
How does it, sorry, that's a new element of detail for me. What are the qualifying earnings? Is that statutory or is that?
No, it's statutory. It doesn't vary from one provider to another. There's a statutory level. And so we put it on there's a little tab at the end, which we can have a look at, the entitlements tab, but something called the monthly lower earnings level, which is re-qualifying earnings for pension, which is £520. And that's the rate, I think, that's been set for 22-23. Certainly was the rate for 21-22. And that's applicable to everyone who pays pension on the basis of paying it against qualifying earnings. So, so it works out that it'll take the salary, it'll take off the bit that is not, doesn't have pension contributions attached to it, and it then applies the pension contributions to the rest. So, but Lenny, do you want me, well, what's your situation? Do we pay it on qualifying earnings or on whole salary?
It's on qualifying earnings, so you can leave it on that.
Okay, coolio.
Just does the questions come in? Does the toolkit add employers on costs? Now I'm thinking with holidays and pensions. Jay,
yes.
Answer it.
It doesn't apply holiday because you've already put your holiday in
there.
So you've already said if you're a sessional setting, you've already said you're employing your member of staff for the period of time that covers the holiday entitlement. So you don't want to double count holidays. So you should be saying when you're putting your weeks per year. The other bit is employers' national insurance, and yes, it does add on employers. So again, if we look at entitlements, employers' national insurance currently is payable at 15.05%, and then there's a lower earnings level NI threshold per week, which is again currently £170. As we're on this page, I'll explain it to you. So there's lots of formula, obviously, throughout this toolkit, and we wouldn't want to have to go back in and change every formula every time something that might be changed from government changes. So some of those things are around the numbers of hours of free entitlement that children are entitled to. And at the moment, the base funding hours are 15 for all children and then 30 for children who are eligible. And at 2-year-old funding, children who are eligible get 15 hours. Now that could change at some point in the future. So all we'd have to do here is go into these cells and change those numbers if that change ever took place. And a good example actually is pupil premium, which up until a week ago was in here at 0.53 and is now in here at 0.6. These are locked because we're not anticipating that any of these will change anytime soon. But these are the kinds of things that tend to change annually. So I've left these unlocked so that you as the provider or the consultant who's with you can amend these, but these should all be correct for the year ahead. So you shouldn't have to be changing these imminently. So national insurance is applied 15.05%, bearing in mind the employer's threshold. And so there are hidden pages that do all those calculations for you. But the short answer to that question is yes.
Yes. Thank you, Jason.
Okay, so staff costs, we've put in the staffing. We've said it's on qualifying earnings. So how much will you spend on other staff-related costs, training, travel, uniforms, agency staff, if you think you'll need any, and any other staff costs? Again, we've put in some suggestions, but this isn't by no means a finite list, just whatever applies to you. Okay. Fire away, Lenny.
So I've got £200 a term on training.
Yeah.
I've not got any travel expenses.
Okay.
I do have £350 a year on uniforms, which we spend in the summer term. So it can be put into the summer term as opposed to splitting it across the 3. And we don't use any agency.
Anything else?
I've not got any other staff related costs currently.
Okay, cool. Right, so that's staff costs taken care of. And then we're going to look at premises costs. So the way the premises cost is laid out, we ask what your quarterly rent and service charges are likely to be. So for most settings, you'll have some sort of lease or license or occupancy agreement, and you'll know what your rent portion is. It may not be very large. It may be that the service charge part of what you pay is bigger, or it may be large. But anyway, that's a good, whatever you're paying now will be a pretty good guide of what you're likely to pay going forward. Obviously, utilities and gas and electricity costs have gone up recently, so you would maybe want to factor that in. But so we ask quarterly, and it's likely that you're going to pay these costs once per quarter. So you drop the cost into the month that's relevant to you. But I mean, if you paid it monthly, obviously you can do that. You can divide each quarterly amount across the 3 months. It's whatever is relevant to you. So in this case, Lenny?
So mine is paid quarterly, and it's paid in the June, September, December and March, and it's 3,500 each quarter.
Okay, so and it depends how you pay. Some settings will pay a rent and the service charges, and they'll be billed as a fixed amount. Sometimes you'll be billed based on a proportion of the costs that relate to a larger building. But you fill this in as it's relevant to you. So then we come down to other premises costs. And again, we've got what we think are the sort of main premises costs, but there is a coverall at the bottom where you can put in anything that may be missed by these headings. But we'll just go through these as well. So utilities, what do you spend on utilities?
So it's £500 a term on utilities.
Yeah.
It's £350 on maintenance and repairs.
Yeah.
A term, and £200 on refuge collection a term.
Yeah.
I spend £100 on security and health and safety a term.
Yeah.
And then £250 on business rates a term.
Okay.
And then no other costs.
Okay. So no other premises costs, fine. Yeah, that's grand. So in total, 18,200 premises costs. Great. Okay. So the last part of the toolkit is to look at anything that would be any other expenses that we may incur. So we've got, again, a number of headings that hopefully are the most relevant. So we've got consumables costs. What do you spend on consumables?
It's about £500 each term.
Yep.
And cleaning is about £250 a term.
You're gonna be squeaking by the end of this, Lenny.
Yeah, apologies for the sore throat. It's not COVID related, it's having young children.
Okay, that's grand. And then equipment cost, are you planning to spend?
So looking at my in-room equipment and resource and stuff, it's probably about £1,000 a term.
Okay. Yeah.
And office equipment, kitchen equipment's about £500 a term.
Okay. So I know when we do our budgets at the Alliance, it tends to be that if you've just spent a lot of money on office, kitchen, laundry equipment, then that's not a good guide for what you're going to spend next year, because you've just replaced all the stuff that you needed to replace. So you're not likely to have to replace it again next year. Whereas for room furniture and equipment, it might be that everything, there's a general renewals every year, something or a number of items need to be replaced. So, again, it just everything that relates to what you need and what's relevant to your setting. So food costs, what do we spend on meals and snacks? Oh, mute.
Okay, so it's about £300 a term.
Okay. And then admin and office costs. So again, we've tried to cover most of the items that we think are most prevalent, but you know, again, there's other costs at the bottom if we miss anything. So fire away.
Okay, so I don't have any processing fees. We don't have a card machine.
Okay.
Bank charges is about £40 a term.
Yeah.
Accountancy is £1,000 a year, which is paid in the summer.
Okay.
Marketing events is around £500 a term.
Yeah.
Stationery is £150 a term. And I'm saying around on these because it's kind of an estimate from previous years, thinking about rising costs and those sorts of things. So I think this gives me a good indication of where my spending is likely to be.
Okay.
So nothing on media licenses.
Okay.
But £250 a term on my telephone and broadband.
Yeah. What's your setting insurance?
Yeah, £300 on my public liability insurance a term.
You pay that every term?
Yeah, it's termly £300. Yeah.
Okay. Ofsted, 35.
£35, and we pay it in the spring.
Membership and subscriptions?
Yeah, £100 annually paid in the summer. And no other costs.
Okay, no other office admin costs, no other costs that you can think of. Okay, good. Okay, so we've filled in all of the kind of the elements of the toolkit. The next tab is what we call this an assumptions tab. I mean, really, this is just notes for your own guidance around why you've put in what you've put into your budget. So, for example, around occupancy, you know, you might look at what an average week in the summer term looks like based on what you've done in the past. But you might think, well, you know, for whatever reason, whether it's a COVID pandemic or a local setting across the road closing, or there may be all sorts of factors, just a big marketing push, an explosion in the birth rate. There may be all sorts of reasons why you think what will happen next year will not be the same as what's happened this year. And you want to factor that into the numbers of children that you're going to put into your toolkit. That's all good. Put that in your toolkit. But at the same time, say what those reasons were. Write it down. Because if you come back to this 3 months or 6 months later, and you've only put in numbers, but you haven't put in any explanations, you won't know why you put the numbers in that you put in there. You might remember, you might not. And certainly if you're sharing this with other people, they won't know why you've put those numbers in. So it's really just an aid memoir to allow you to understand your rationale for why you've put numbers in and put in the figures that you have. And then as you come back to it through the course of the year, if you want to see how you're performing against your financial forecast, it may be that you can see that some of the assumptions you made have turned out to be about right and some haven't. And you can maybe adjust your forecasts or think about how that will affect you going forward. So like I say, I think it's a good discipline to pop in just a few brief notes about the basis upon which you've entered the figures that you have.
Just to add to that, Jason, what I find it really useful for me when doing this sort of thing is also reflection when I'm looking at next year. So when I come to next year, it's kind of looking at what assumptions I made, how true they come, the reasoning behind the decisions I made. And as we started out on this, it's about developing that conversation, about me understanding why the numbers are what they are. And I think that's as important as the numbers that we see is what can I look at to change? Can I look at switching energy suppliers? Can I look at what sort of marketing I need to do to get more children in and that sort of thing? So I think it forms a good basis for future analysis of your setting, really.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Right, I'm going to shuffle you along because I'm conscious of the time and we all want to know the big reveal.
Big reveal. All right, so here we are. Dun, dun, dun. So the budget is shown in two ways. It's the same figures. You can see the budget as a monthly budget, showing income and expenditure monthly or termly, obviously showing summer, autumn, and spring, but the totals are the same. So as we can see, because we've said that we're going to receive 70% of NEF in the first payment and 30% in the second, and the same with 2-year-old funding, and we've said which months we're going to receive it in, you can see that that's where these figures have been dropped into the budget. And overall, in this case, I think, can you see that? In this case, this setting is forecasting a surplus of £12,500. So that's that would be a healthy surplus, I think, for for a setting that is generating £150,000 worth of income, that's a perfectly respectable performance. What I would be doing at this point is saying, well, how does that compare to my expectation and to what I've done in the past? Because if you've put in lots of information into this forecast based on what you think your normal levels of activity are, what are your typical levels of staffing, and you generate a small deficit, and then you put those figures in here and it says you're going to generate a big surplus, then you have to think to yourself, well, what am I missing? What have I not done that should have gone into the budget that would, perhaps potentially make a difference that's not going there? So part of, Lenny sort of started off by saying this toolkit is about conversations, and it really is. It's about sort of prompting you to think about all the areas of income and expenditure that you could generate. It's about thinking about what meaningful changes you can make. So I know when I started working for the Alliance 1,000 years ago, when we were doing budgets, quite often we were required to produce budgets that showed sustainability. And an easy way to make a budget look sustainable is just to change the numbers so that it looks sustainable. That doesn't actually affect the setting at all. It doesn't, if you think a setting's not going to do very well because, numbers are low and staff costs are too high for the numbers of children that you have, you're not going to achieve sustainability by just pretending you'll have more children. You have to actually look at that financial forecast and say, what can we meaningfully do? What meaningful change can we make in order to make our setting sustainable? And those meaningful changes can be around things like raising fees or increasing the numbers of children, if we can do that, or potentially reducing staff costs if we think we're overstaffed, or negotiating with our landlord to try and get a better deal. So it's about looking at your budget, about your forecasts, thinking about what meaningful changes you can make and what you can factor into your toolkit, and then using that toolkit to monitor performance going forward to see, as Lenny has said, using it for future reference as well when you're moving on to into the following years of your of your delivery. So hopefully that makes sense.
I'll look at the termly budget very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly, termly budget. So 138,640. It just shows the same performance, but this time just by term. And I think the reason we've done that is I think for most settings that are sessional, they probably think of delivery on a termly basis, and for most settings that are full daycare, they think of the delivery on a monthly basis. So, but they're both there for everyone to use, and they can you can look across both of them.
Every time I walk through this, I think it's tremendous, and so it's a real credit to particularly Jason for putting most of it together, but also the input that Lenny's had with it. And hopefully people with us on the webinar take the same view. We're conscious that that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and we'd had the opportunity to prepare the data in advance. And so I think, thank you for sharing, because what I wanted to just do, whilst there may be some questions coming through from other people about particular details or something, just to see how this fits in to what we're able to offer through the Strong Early Years London project. And as both guys have iterated, this is, yes, the numbers are useful. What's really important is the discussion. So if a setting wants to talk with us about, can I use the toolkit and make it available? Yes, but what we also do, we have a number of trained staff across the partners who can actually spend the 2-3 hours with you going through the numbers, putting them in and having those conversations. Why did you put that number in there? What do you think may happen? And certainly the change into utility costs is going to be a big impact, I think, from April next time. So it really, we are here to try and help you work through it, but it is helping you, not doing it for you. And so we are able to offer up to 3 hours support to walk any individual manager or whomsoever wants to do this through the Strong Early Years budget. So what I wanted to just do was share a couple of my slides by way of summary to just walk through what's available. Oh, and I'm on the wrong slide because I had all that issue earlier on. Right. For those people who've had their appetites whetted for how the toolkit might be able to help them, we are doing a similar session on Wednesday as a Business Connect sessions, which are generally smaller, but do allow people to be more engaged and ask their questions once they've had an opportunity to reflect on from today. So when you receive these slides, that is a live link that allows people to go directly to sign on for the session on Wednesday. Also visiting the website, which again, there's further information as we come on through the slides. We are 2 other Business Connect events, just to give you warning indication about is the 2 leading up to December are looking at specific areas that have been raised with us around managerial aspects of business. Creating a culture of safeguarding is a breakfast session that we're doing on Tuesday the 14th of December, and on the Thursday of that week, something around supporting staff to fulfill their role. Again, a management opportunity. So again, when you receive these slides, which will be circulated tomorrow to everybody who was present today or registered for today, please do follow those links to sign up for future events. When you receive the slides, I won't talk you through these now. These gives a bit of information about other support that is available outside the Strong Early Years London project that is available to all businesses in London through the London Business Hub. And if all of that leaves you wanting to know more about the Strong Early Years London project, the 2 contact details there, one is my email address and one is my colleague Jonathan Lucas. If there are any questions you have, or if you want to find out further information about the support we can offer you, do please send us an email or visit the website where there's a nice contact us form and details of phone numbers as well. I think that is all I wanted to do. Yes, it is. So whilst either we've absolutely bamboozled everybody with that, gentlemen, hopefully it's because I've had no questions come in, and I'm conscious that we've taken just over the hour that we were scheduled. So I won't take up any more of your Monday evening. It just remains for me to say thank you again to Lenny and Jason for their hard work in creating this toolkit, which I think once people have an opportunity to play around with it and start to analyze their settings from this particular perspective can be really useful. Having some nice words back in from Chaldelia, thank you very much, useful information. Do please get in contact with us and we can arrange sessions with you, as I said. And it just remains for me to say thank you to you guys, everybody, for being with us on a Monday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your evenings. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.